Hey everybody, and welcome to Google Plus Developers Live, Come Auth with us. I'm Joanna Smith, and I'm a Developer Programs Engineer for Google Plus.
And I'm Silvano Luciani, and I'm as well a Developer Programs Engineer on Google Plus. And this week we are exceptionally coming to you from our studio in New York City, where we are for our Google Plus sign-in boot camps.
We're very excited to be on our global tour for these sign-in boot camps, but even more exciting is that today we actually get to have our special guest with us by live breathing here in the room and not by Hangout. So everyone please welcome our Google Plus developer expert, Alan Furstenberg.
Hi Joanna, it's great to be here. Thank you very much. It's great to see you guys in the New York office. Glad to see you over on this side of the country. I'm Alan Furstenberg. I'm a Google developer expert with Google Plus, and I'm glad to be helping out on today's show.
Fantastic. So last week we showed you how easy it is to add Google Plus sign-in to your website with using JavaScript. And basically what we can do is by adding Google Plus sign-in, you bring the power of Google to your site. And when a user is signed in, you get this Oauth token so that you can make calls on their behalf to the API while they're active in your site. But that's when you're using client-side. But there's more to it, and to better understand your user and what's right for you, we're going to go over the different possible flows for authentication. So there's 3 of them, right?
Yes, Joanna, spot on. We have 3 different options, and today we are going to do a walkthrough of all the 3 different options. We will use different tools. We will use a sample, a very small sample. We will use the Google Auth Playground, and we will show you some of the source code from one of our quick starts, the PHP quick starts.
So what do you think, Alan? How's that sound?
I think it sounds good. I think one of the important things that people should take away from this is that what we're covering today isn't just applicable to Google Plus sign-in, it's applicable to everything across the board of all of Google's APIs. So if you understand the OAuth flow from this, you'll be able to apply it in a wide variety of other tools that are available from Google.
That's a really good point. Thank you. Sometimes it's hard for us to remember that for developers, there's more than just our API. So it's good to have reminders of that. So let's start with the client-side flow. And this is what we showed you guys last week in particular. And when you're using our Google Plus sign-in button, you basically get this flow for free. And it's really simple and straightforward. And but the key to remember is that when you're using client-side authentication, you're able to get an access token that allows you to make calls on behalf of the user while they are active in your app. And that's the key piece. As long as they're in your app, you're good to go.
So we can show an example. It's our big red sign-in button. We showed you the last week how to place it in your web page and how to integrate in your website. What we want to show you this week is what is the Auth result, what is the object that it's returned after when the sign-in callback is called after a successful login. So when I click sign in this case we are seeing our familiar consent dialog. It's full screen. It went to a redirect page because I'm full screen on my monitor. When I click accept, I'm back to my app. And what I'm doing in this sample is just dumping the content of the object that is returned to our callback. There's a lot of stuff, as you can see in there, but I want to focus on just 2 values. The first one I want to focus on is the access token. So this one. And as you can see, this is what the client library will use to sign the request that you do to our APIs. This token will be valid for 1 hour. When you use this flow, what happens is that we have a sign-in mode that is called immediate mode, which means that if you already gave consent, if the user has already gave consent to your app, when the user will be back, if the access token has expired, we will go through an automatic flow. You will give you another access token, and then you will be able to start again making requests to the Google Plus API or any other API, as Alan pointed. The second thing I want to show you is the code. So this code, remember about this because we will see this in a while in the other 2 flows that we will present to you.
So I think one of the important things to understand about when you're going to be using this sort of thing is primarily when you're working with the JavaScript libraries and you're restricting all of your access from the client, where you want to be displaying things from JavaScript, controlling things from JavaScript, and you're essentially going to be letting the user connect directly from the page that's presented back to Google servers and contacting the Google servers for that data. So I think this is where you're going to be seeing the most use for this particular flow.
So, Alan, you use client-side a lot, right?
It's primarily most of what I do these days. Is I tend to create a lot of JavaScript mockups and keep all of the work inside JavaScript itself, bothering my server as little as possible.
And do you do that because it's simpler or faster, or is it just your favorite?
It depends. It really depends on the project that I'm working on at any given time. So most of the work that I'm doing these days pretty much is staying within the client side. There's no need to talk to my server. My server doesn't need to get a lot of information, doesn't need to control a lot of what the user is doing. I just want the user to be communicating with Google as much as possible, as directly as possible.
That makes sense.
And communicating with me far less.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And so that was client-side, which you've now seen several times. But the second flow we wanted to talk to you about is the server-side flow for web server applications. And these may access a Google API while the user is present in the application or after the user has left. And that's what's really beneficial about the server-side flow, is that you get this additional refresh token. And so you have the ability to meet somewhere else, but it requires that the server is able to keep a secret. And that's what's really key here.
Yeah, keeping the client secret. A non-secret client secret doesn't sound very good. To show you some of the details, we are going to use this wonderful tool, which is the Auth Playground, which will allow you to inspect all the different steps of the different Auth flows. And by using this gear, you can configure the type of Auth flow that you want to inspect. In this case, it will be the server side for us. The thing that we want to show to you is how you will get a refresh token. And the refresh token is a long-lived token. It will actually never expire until the user revokes the token or disconnect your app. And what you can do with the refresh token is request a new access token when the access token that you're using has expired, which means after 1 hour. So in the first step, we are asked to select and authorize an API. And given that our Plus API is way down the list, I already added the scope. But this shows you that you can actually try this with your own custom scopes. So when I click Authorize API, I'm redirected to the full screen authorization server. In this case, it's important to understand that for the server-side flow, this will always happen. And that's the reason why when you configure this type of flow, you will also need the redirect URI. Because after this redirect to the Google authorization server, the Google authorization server will redirect back the user to your app, to the redirect URI that you have specified in the configuration of the project on the API console. And after I click accept, in this case, we go back to the Auth Playground because that's what is configured as a redirect URI for this project. Now, if you can see in the URL, it's not very big, but the last part is a code, which is similar to the code that I was showing to you before, returned by the sign in button. This is we can use this code to make an exchange with the Google authorization server and get back a new pair of an access token and a refresh token. The code is here as well, and it's more visible, and I can do the exchange by clicking this big blue button, Exchange Authorization Code. When I do it, if you want, you can analyze on the right side what the request was and what the response is, but the most important thing is that I got this pair, access token and refresh token. Now, it's important to understand that you will get the refresh token only one and only after the user has given consent to your application. So given that you are doing this because you want offline access to the user data, you need to store it along with the user data in your database or wherever you store data for your application. And don't lose it. If you lose it for any reason, you can force the user to re-authenticate using the approval prompt parameter and setting it to false, but this will cause the consent dialog to be displayed again to the user, which could be confusing. Now, I can use the least possible operation to get all the operation that the Google Plus API, which is the one that we authorized in this demo, available. The other thing that I can do is go back to step 2. Let me close this. Go back to the second step, and there's another gray button which is refresh access token. And if I click it, you can see what happens when you want to actually use a refresh token to get a new access token that will last another hour.
And I think one of the things that's important to understand about this is when you would use this over the client side one. And primarily, I use this the most when under one of two circumstances. The first is when what I'm doing on the client side isn't very much related to what's going on with Google itself. So if my client is almost exclusively talking to my server, or if I'm getting some static information back from the server, this is when I would be doing it. My server is doing all of the heavy lifting. The other case when it's doing it is when I don't have a client at all, when basically I need my server to be able to do things on my behalf. So looking outside Google+, for example, I might be wanting to write something into a spreadsheet that's in Google Drive, or I might want to be creating Google Drive documents for me to look at later, or using the new API, I might be wanting to create new moments and have those moments show up as part of my Google+ history. These are cases where there's no direct client interaction, so the server needs that refresh token and needs to be able to use that refresh token at any time.
Sure. And the other thing is, this Oauth Playground has been available in our documentation, and it's a really great resource for you to follow the flow. So if you're ever a little confused about Oauth and its complexities, definitely take a moment to really step through and see everything that happens at each stage, because this is honestly how I learned Oauth when I first started at Google, and I think it'll be really good for you too.
Same for me.
And so the third flow we wanted to talk to you about is what we call the one-time code flow, and it uses this same authorization code to exchange to the server and to get that access and refresh token back. But what's really key here is that you can actually receive the code on the client like we saw earlier, and you can pass that code securely to your server in order to do the exchange for the token, so that you don't have to pass a user authentication token around, which could be unsafe or insecure.
So yeah, we have a diagram on our developers documentation on developers.google.com, and this is a scheme of what Joanna just told you. So what happened when you use the Google+ sign-in, as I showed you before, you get an access token, but you also get a code, and you can use that code to perform the exchange. I will show you now how to do it using one of our quick starts that you can find in our Google+ repository on GitHub. As you might already know, there's quick starts for many different languages. So there's two key things here. What I'm showing to you now is from the index.html of our quick start, which is where we render the button, and then we have some JavaScript asynchronous call to a simple backend API implemented in PHP. So what happens in this connect server function is that we are posting to our server the code that we obtained from the sign-in button that was in the object that is returned to the callback of the sign-in button. One important thing that we are doing is we are to avoid cross-site request forgery. When we render this page from the server side, we create the state, which is a random value. We render the random value in the parameters of this invocation, and we save it in the session, so that when we receive this request on the server, we can compare the value with what we stored in the session, and we should do it probably in the database. If they are the same value, then we can see that this is our request. Otherwise, something fishy might have happened. If we go to see what happens on the server side in our PHP API, we can use the Google API client for PHP. We just have to initialize it with some standard parameter. At this point, this function, the connect function, is where we post the code. And what happens here is that when we receive the code, we make the exchange and with the Google token info endpoint, with the Google token endpoint, and then we make some verification on the token. We check that the audience of the token is our app, so that we are actually, this token is actually intended to be for our application, and we check that the user that is tied to the access token is actually the user that is trying to log into our app, and then we are good to go. Otherwise, if we had some, if we found some problems, some errors, we return some meaningful error about what happened and what went wrong in this exchange.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out that these checks are really very, very important. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's one other way that a lot of people have talked about doing this sort of thing is handing the access code from the client to the server, and that's just a bad way to do it. Using this separate code and then doing these additional checks on the server side is much more secure, much more reliable, and it really kind of drives home the point that Google is trying to create code and create flows that are meant to protect developers and users combined. I think one of the great things about this particular flow and the way this one works is that in the end, both the client and the server have access to a user's information, can communicate with Google on the user's behalf. So you can have some of the JavaScript stuff using the JavaScript APIs to talk directly to Google, and the server ends up with the code, ends up with the ability to do the refresh token, ends up with the ability to do things on the user's behalf if that's what you're trying to do. So that's an important dual feature. It's really pretty powerful that you're allowing this sort of thing and allowing it securely.
Yeah, and one important thing that I forgot to mention on the security point of view is that this token is a one-time token, so you can use it only for one exchange, and it will expire pretty soon. So do the exchange fast, because otherwise you won't be able to use it.
Where pretty soon is what, on the order of less than a minute or two, less than that if I remember correctly?
I think even less than a minute. I don't remember the exact. But yeah, I usually do it immediately. So yeah.
And so those are our three flows. It really helps to be able to decide for yourself as a developer if you want to focus primarily on client side, primarily on server side, or if you feel like you really do want to make calls on both sides of your application on behalf of the user. And hopefully with a little bit of this discussion, you'll be able to figure out which one's right for you. But of course, if you want to learn more, definitely check out our documentation at developers.google.com/plus, because that's where we put everything, including that really helpful diagram to track the flow.
Yes, and as you know, as I showed you, our projects on GitHub, you can find quick starts which are showing some different approach, pure client side with the JavaScript, mix the one-time code exchange with the Python, Java, PHP, Ruby, and C#. And then there's also Auth, which is an end-to-end sample application. So it's giving you an example of a more complex authentication scenario that involves also like mobile clients for Android and iOS.
And then of course, if you have any questions, let us know in our Google Plus developers community. I check that every single day to see what's going on and if anyone's looking for some help. And of course, we have Stack Overflow with our Google Plus tag, which we also check daily. And then the final resource is our issue tracker. And if you find a bug or if you have a feature request, go ahead and check there or file a new one. But if you find one that you like, star it, because I use those stars every week when I triage those issues. And the stars are what tell us what's important and which things we need to move into our internal bug system and which feature requests need to be sent along to PMs. So definitely, take the time to star an issue that you find important, because that's going to be really key.
Yeah, I mean, I know I always hang out on Stack Exchange and Stack Overflow. So issues that show up there, I enjoy reading them. I enjoy getting the perspectives of other developers and what you're trying to do. And for that, I always turn to our Google Plus developers community on Google Plus itself. We've got a lot of good exchanges there. Always good to hear how other people are using this, and also the problems that you're having, because that helps me and it helps the team improve the documentation and improve the resources for all of us.
Definitely. If you aren't getting what you need to out of our documentation, you need to be letting us know, because our whole job is to help developers succeed, and that's what we really care about. So definitely speak up about good and bad things. It really helps us out. And that's our show for today. But before we go, I just want to take a moment to thank Alan for coming up and being here with us. It's great to be able to talk to our GDEs. And of course, our other two GDEs are Abraham Williams and Gerwin Sturm, and they're incredibly useful resources. So if you see them hanging out on the internet, definitely give their words some weight because they matter. And thanks for being here.
I'm glad I could be here. Thanks for having me, and thanks for all the support you guys give to all of the developers out there.